clash of realities. Wealthy black belt faces. Her maid, you won't believe the outcome. A luxurious mansion in Atlanta sets the stage for an unexpected encounter between two worlds that were never meant to meet. On one side, Aaliyah, a woman marked by pain, yet carrying within her a quiet strength capable of changing destinies. On the other, Savannah, an heiress used to power, control, and privilege. Between them stands Daniel, torn between loyalty to his family and a growing admiration for the woman everyone tried to keep invisible. What begins as provocation turns into a symbolic battle that exposes prejudice, challenges traditions, and forces everyone to face irreversible choices. Between pride, humiliation, courage, and love, a truth no one expected will come to light, changing the course of this family forever. Before we dive into this story full of emotion and plot twists, tell me something. Where are you watching from? I'd really love to know how far this story is reaching. And if you enjoy intense stories, true love, perseverance, and characters that make us reflect on life, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't just follow each new chapter. You'll also be helping this project grow and bring even more stories that touch the heart. Now get ready, because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that stays in your memory for a long time. The sun hadn't even touched the tall rooftops of Buckhead when the Miller mansion was already breathing routine. Guards checked the cameras, sprinklers whispered over the perfect lawn, and the kitchen was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee with a hint of cinnamon. The cold floor of the main gallery, polished lightstone, reflected the light of the sconces as if it were water. There, kneeling with a bucket of citrus solution and a white cloth, worked Aaliyah Carter. Aaliyah was 30, with deep ebony skin that gleamed under the light. Short, voluminous natural curls, styled in a practical way that revealed her elegant nape and neckline. Her navy blue uniform was flawless, not a thread out of place. Her arms were slim but toned, bearing the subtle definition of someone who carries weight and knows discipline. Her dark brown eyes watched everything, unhurried and unafraid. She scrubbed between the stone joints with steady movements, taking deep breaths. In the back of her mind, a thought flashed like lightning. Today is the eldest son's visit day. "Good morning, Aaliyah," said one of the staff as he passed, balancing a tray of fruit. "Good morning," she replied, not pausing. "Careful with the rug, it's almost dry." Through the glass door leading to the backyard, the sound of falls on the mat echoed. Outside, under the white canopy, Savannah Miller was beginning her morning jiu-jitsu training. The heiress was 27, average height, shoulders shaped by hours at the gym. Her blonde ponytail slid like a ribbon across the lycra of her sports top. Her blue eyes narrowed as she measured up her opponent. An instructor greeted her, and she answered with a confident half-smile. "Ready?" "I want a fast pace today," Savannah said. "Yes, Miss Miller," the instructor replied. Aaliyah looked up for a moment. She saw Savannah execute a grip, her hips rotating with precision. The dry thud of the mat received a blow, followed by a quick tap of surrender. The occasional spectators, two young neighbors and a gym friend, let out an involuntary "wow." The heiress gave a short nod, as if confirming the obvious. "Cold lemon water," Savannah ordered, already back in guard position. "And hurry." "Please." "Yes, miss," a staff member responded, rushing off. Aaliyah returned to her line of tiles, her cloth gliding methodically. She didn't envy Savannah. It was something else. She recognized technique. She recognized discipline. Internally, Her body remembered movements she avoided repeating there so she wouldn't draw attention. Stance, leverage, breathing. 10 years of training left invisible marks. The main gate creaked slightly, and a silent car engine cut through the morning. A modern SUV pulled up near the staircase. Daniel Miller got out, holding a bouquet of white flowers. He was 32, light-skinned, with neatly trimmed facial hair and light brown wavy hair the wind had tousled freely. Cream linen shirt with rolled-up sleeves, dark jeans, and discreet shoes. His green eyes searched for his mother's bedroom window before looking toward the entrance. "Mr. Daniel, it's so good to see you," said the butler, coming to greet him. "Thank you." "How was her night?" "More peaceful. She asked to see you as soon as you arrived." "Great. I'll go up now." As he crossed the hall, Daniel almost kicked Aaliyah's bucket with the tip of his shoe. He stopped immediately, offering a gentle smile. "Sorry, almost made a mess." "It's all good," Aaliyah said, standing naturally. "The way's clear, thanks. Aaliyah, right?" "Yes, sir." There was a moment that didn't belong to anyone. His eyes met hers, calm, alert, without hierarchy. It lasted just long enough for them to silently recognize something unnamed. Daniel inhaled, adjusted the flowers against his chest, and continued up the wide staircase. Outside, Savannah's training got more intense. "One more round," she ordered. "No holding back. As you wish," the instructor replied. In the pantry, the support staff arranged trays. Their conversation flowed quietly, a murmur of dishes and deadlines. "Mr. Daniels really changed, huh?" one kitchen worker remarked. "He has... Now he's into those affordable housing projects," replied another, setting a pitcher on the table. "He could have stayed here, managing his father's company. Not everyone knows how to live in this bubble." Aaliyah entered with a clean cloth in hand. "I can put the flowers in a vase, if you'd like," she offered. "Thanks, Aaliyah. Just leave them on the table. I'll handle it," the kitchen worker replied. Savannah walked into the pantry, sweating but flawless, like the effort was part of her look. She grabbed the pitcher, tasted the water with an analytical expression, and returned it with a nod that wasn't exactly a thank you. "One more round. Then I'll come for the smoothie," she said, already heading back out. At the top of the stairs, Daniel knocked gently on his mother's door before entering. Light filtered through the linen curtains, casting stripes across the pale carpet. He set the flowers next to old photos, kissed her forehead, and sat in the armchair. "Good morning, Amata, Mom. My son?" Her voice was weak but warm. "You've brought spring into this room." "I brought longing," he said, smiling. "And a few ideas for the back garden. I think we could make room for a vegetable patch. It'll be good for the kitchen staff and for you, when you feel like taking a walk." "Talk to your father about it." "I will." Outside, the mansion looked like a balanced organism, but small signs hinted at tension beneath the surface. A slightly crooked painting in a hallway, a gardener pausing too long to answer a text, a security guard's gaze lingering a bit too long on the young woman carrying groceries. Aaliyah noticed every micro gesture. That's how she moved through the world, reading what wasn't said. Back in the hall, Aaliyah stretched, grabbed the glass spray bottle, and checked the subtle reflections in the picture frames. In the distance, she heard Savannah laughing, a sharp, metallic sound. She remembered one of her sensei's old lessons. "Breathe when the world screams." She breathed. Daniel came down a few minutes later, holding a notebook. He barely looked at his own steps. His mind was on the projects he coordinated across town, on the families waiting for a key, on the way the hot pavement in the outskirts radiated heat back in the late afternoon. When he saw Aaliyah still in the hall, he slowed down. "Hey, sorry again for almost tripping," he said, with a smile that asked permission to exist. "You're already forgiven," Aaliyah replied, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "That smell. Is that lemon with what? White vinegar. Gets rid of the most stubborn stains. Does it work on people too?" She looked at him, surprised by the subtle humor. Some stains take more than one pass. Makes sense. Daniel headed toward the garden but looked over his shoulder before going through the glass door. Aaliyah knelt down again, resuming her rhythm. The conversation had been simple, yet clean, like the floor she had just finished. Savannah ended her training with a quick throw, pinned her opponent, and waited for the tap of surrender. When it came, she raised her hands, breathing victoriously. Without looking directly at Aaliyah, she spoke loudly enough for the whole house to hear. "Today we test limits." The sentence hung in the air, full of challenge and certainty. Aaliyah didn't react. She stored away the cloth, took off her gloves, and adjusted her name tag in her pocket. On her face was a calm that bordered on defiant. Inside, something stirred, not fear, not anger, recognition. In a mansion that never sleeps, sometimes all it takes is a glance to wake what was dormant. The end of Savannah's training brought movement to the mansion. Glasses of fresh juice were served. White towels passed from hand to hand, and the kitchen buzzed with fast footsteps. The wall clock showed just after 9 when Aaliyah came in to restock the cleaning cloths. The smell of bread in the oven mixed with the aroma of strong coffee, creating a welcoming feeling that, for her, rarely felt real. Savannah appeared in the doorway, her ponytail still tied, her face slightly flushed from the workout, but her blue eyes held a chill. She wore a designer sports bra and tight pants that highlighted her athletic figure. The staff paused for a moment when they noticed the heiress's presence, as if an invisible command had been given. Aaliyah kept her posture straight, folding cloths calmly. She could feel Savannah's gaze on her, heavy, like a blade about to be drawn. Daniel entered shortly after, holding the notebook where he jotted down ideas for his social projects. He greeted the staff subtly and walked over to the counter to get a glass of water. That was when Savannah noticed how her brother's eyes lingered, for a second too long, on Aaliyah. A thin smile appeared on Savannah's lips, not the kind that signals joy, but poison. She crossed her arms, tilted her head, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Some people forget their place and start looking up. The air seemed to freeze. A server carrying a tray hesitated, unsure whether to keep moving. Aaliyah stopped folding the cloth and lifted her eyes, looking at Savannah without haste. There was no anger in her expression, only firmness. "With all due respect, Miss Savannah," Aaliyah said, her voice low but steady. "A person's place is wherever they can walk with their head held high." A murmur ran through the staff, barely perceptible. Daniel slowly closed his notebook, watching the scene. His face hardened. Between the anger and surprise, there was also a glint of admiration for how Aaliyah stood her ground in front of his sister. Savannah let out a dry laugh, leaning against the counter. "What a beautiful answer," she said. "Almost sounds rehearsed. Maybe you've been training more than just the floors in this house." The tension was thick. Everyone's silence framed the confrontation in an even more cruel light. Aaliyah took a deep breath, remembering her former master's words. True strength lies in the silence that doesn't bow. I don't need to rehearse to speak the truth, she replied, looking straight into the heiress's eyes. Savannah narrowed her gaze, irritated by the maid's calmness. It was as if her provocation had lost its bite. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself closer to Aaliyah, and spoke firmly. "That's enough, Savannah. You're crossing the line." Her eyes turned to her brother, icy. Defending a maid, Daniel. That's interesting. I thought you had more important things to worry about. He didn't reply immediately. He just held his sister's gaze while his hand gripped the notebook tightly. The tension between them was obvious, and everyone in the kitchen could feel it. Aaliyah gathered the cloths and got ready to leave, but before she did, she said one last thing, without raising her voice, as if planting a seed that would one day grow. It's not always the one who shouts the loudest who's right. She left the kitchen. The sound of her firm footsteps echoed until it faded down the hallway. Daniel followed her with his eyes, silently, while Savannah bit her lower lip, caught between irritation and a feeling she couldn't name. The air was left with an uncomfortable silence, as if everyone were bracing for a storm that hadn't yet broken. The rest of the day at the mansion followed its usual flawless routine, but the atmosphere had shifted. After the tense exchange in the kitchen, Aaliyah found refuge in a part of the house where almost no one went, the trophy room. It was a long space with glass shelves, gold and silver medals, and carefully framed photos. The air smelled of polished wood and carried a respectful silence, like a temple built to honor victories. Aaliyah walked slowly, a dust cloth in hand. Her eyes scanned the smiling faces in podium photos. Savannah appeared in many of them, pristine white uniform, perfectly tied belt, a smile of someone who had never doubted she'd win. Next to her, judges and defeated opponents. The maid stopped in front of a photo where a teenage Savannah held a trophy bigger than her torso. A subtle smile crossed Aaliyah's lips, not admiration, but a blend of irony and memory. She rested the cloth on the frame and whispered to herself, "I felt that too." A flash from the past took over her mind. The mat in a modest gym in South Atlanta, the smell of sweat and cheap disinfectant, a patient coach correcting her stance. She remembered the day she earned her purple belt, with a few but sincere applause. She also recalled the embrace of her partner, who said, "You're stronger than you think, Aaliyah." That memory hurt, but it also lit something inside her. The door creaked slightly. Aaliyah turned quickly and saw Daniel standing at the threshold. He didn't have his notebook, just his hands in his pockets. His eyes scanned the trophy cases, then settled on her. "You like it here?" he asked, breaking the silence. "It's not about liking," Aaliyah replied, turning her gaze back to the photos. "It's recognition. These medals tell stories. Some of them I know up close." Daniel stepped in, getting closer to the frames. "You used to fight too?" he asked, genuinely curious. Aaliyah hesitated. She usually didn't share that part of her life with anyone there, but something in his voice, gentle, inviting, made her feel like she could trust him. 10 years of training, she said, steady, made it to the purple belt. Won a few small tournaments, but the mat was never about medals. It was about survival. Daniel looked at her, surprised. Survival? Yes. Her voice trembled slightly, but didn't break. When I lost my partner, when violence took away the future I dreamed of, I almost lost myself too. The mat saved me when nothing else made sense. Without it, I wouldn't be here. There was a heavy silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing someone else's pain, then looked at her again, with a different kind of intensity. There was no distance, no hierarchy. His expression said it all. He saw her now, not as a maid, but as an equal. "I'm so sorry, Aaliyah," he said softly. "No one should have to carry that kind of pain alone." She took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotion threatening to rise in her eyes. It's not about carrying it alone. It's about not letting it define who you'll be forever. Daniel nodded slowly, moved. At that moment, Savannah passed by in the hallway. She didn't enter, but she stopped long enough to notice their closeness. Her blue eyes grew even colder, and a knot of jealousy silently formed. Inside the room, Aaliyah turned her gaze away from the photos and went back to her cloth. But inside, she knew something had shifted. Daniel knew it too. That conversation was only the beginning of a connection that would shake everything around them. Night fell over Buckhead, with its streets lit by golden lampposts and imported cars gliding silently. In the Miller mansion, the main hall was set for dinner. A spotless linen tablecloth, silver candlesticks reflecting soft light, porcelain plates arranged in almost military order. The guests were few, but carefully selected. Business partners of Richard Miller, wives in sparkling dresses, and two young lawyers laughing loudly, as if trying to impress. Savannah entered the dining room in a green silk dress that highlighted the cool tone of her blue eyes. She walked like she owned not just the house, but every glance turned her way. Aaliyah served discreetly, her uniform crisp, balancing trays without a sound. Daniel, sitting next to his mother, watched the scene with a controlled expression, but his eyes betrayed tension. Dinner unfolded with conversations about investments, travel, and the new luxury condo Richard was building. Suddenly, Savannah, holding her wine glass, let out a smile laced with malice. She deliberately looked at Aaliyah, who was walking behind her, and raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Did you all know our maid here has experience in martial arts?" The sentence sliced through the air like a knife. Several guests turned to look at Aaliyah, some surprised, others holding back laughter. Daniel frowned, already anticipating what was coming. Savannah leaned on her chair, resting her chin in her hand. "Show us if you really know how to fight, Aaliyah," she said mockingly. "Or is that just behind-the-scenes talk?" The room froze. The clinking of cutlery stopped, as if everyone was waiting to see the reaction. Aaliyah stood, holding the tray firmly, her eyes fixed on Savannah. She took a deep breath before responding, and her voice came out calm, without a tremble. "Be careful what you wish for." A heavy silence fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the lawyers, maybe to break the tension, let out a nervous laugh. Another guest followed. Soon the whole table was laughing, as if it had all been a classy joke to lighten the evening. But Daniel knew it wasn't a joke. In Aaliyah's eyes, there was something unshakable, a fire that refused to be belittled. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the evening. "That's enough, Savannah. Let's keep dinner civilized." But his daughter just raised her glass and replied with irony, "It was just a joke." "Dad." "Nothing serious." The guests nodded, returning to their conversations, but the tension lingered in the air, vibrating like an over-tightened string. Aaliyah left the room in silence, carrying the tray with steady steps. Daniel followed her with his eyes to the door, his fingers gripping the napkin on his lap. He felt something was about to happen, something that would forever change the way everyone at that table saw her, and him too. Dinner ended, but Savannah's words still hung in the air like smoke. Aaliyah collected plates and glasses with her usual composure, though her heart beat faster than normal. When she left the room to take the trays back to the kitchen, Daniel stood up quietly and followed her into the quiet hallway. He caught up to her near the service stairs, where the lighting was dimmer and the guests' chatter didn't reach. "Aaliyah, wait," he said softly, almost pleading. "You don't have to take this. Savannah just wants to humiliate you in front of everyone. Don't give her that satisfaction." Aaliyah set the tray down on the sideboard and looked up at him. There was dignity in her posture, but also something deeper, as if she carried the history of many who never had a voice. "I'm not fighting Savannah," she answered firmly. "I'm fighting what she represents." The words fell between them like a revelation. Daniel stared at her in silence, absorbing the strength of her response. His heart pounded, as if he'd suddenly realized that Aaliyah wasn't just a maid among the mansion's luxury. She was resistance in the form of a woman. Without thinking, driven by impulse, Daniel stepped forward and kissed her. It was a brief kiss, intense, unexpected, that united two opposing forces in a moment of fragility and courage. When they pulled away, both were breathing fast, startled by what they'd done, but neither of them apologized. There was too much truth in that kiss to deny it. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the house, Savannah paced the hallways with sharp steps. Restless since dinner, she went to her father's office, where a shelf held old employee records and folders. She was looking for something, anything to use against Aaliyah, proof that she was just an intruder. She opened drawers, rifled through files, until she found a forgotten envelope with local newspaper clippings. Her blue eyes focused on an old photo. Aaliyah, still young, in a white uniform, a purple belt around her waist, raising the arm of a defeated opponent. Another clipping showed her winning a neighborhood tournament. The contempt Savannah had always felt turned first to surprise, then to fear. She realized she wasn't just about to face a maid with no resources, but a woman with technique, discipline, and history. The fear burned for a few seconds, then turned into something more corrosive: hatred. Savannah crushed the papers in her hands, breathing deeply. "So that's how it is," she muttered to herself. "You want to face me as an equal, then I'll crush you." At the service stairs, Aaliyah adjusted the tray and walked on, trying to hide the flame still burning on her lips. Daniel stayed behind, watching her disappear down the hall. He knew a line had been crossed, and that nothing would be the same again. In the trophy room, Savannah's shadow appeared, reflected in the glass of the display cases. She still held the clippings and wore a cold smile. To her, this wouldn't be a fair fight. It would be war. The next morning, the Miller mansion looked more like a stage than a home. Staff rushed to set up a space in the backyard. Thick mats were laid over the flawless grass, surrounded by folding chairs and couches brought from the lounge area. The sun shone high, reflecting off the windows, and every detail made it clear. The improvised duel wouldn't be just a game. It would be a spectacle. Guests began arriving in luxury cars, dressed in stylish summer outfits. Some held flutes of sparkling wine, others pulled out their phones, eager to capture every move. The buzz was filled with curiosity and amusement, like they were about to watch some exotic show to spice up their afternoon. Savannah appeared first, walking across the lawn with confident steps. She wore a flawless white GI, her black belt tied tightly around her waist, gleaming like a living trophy. Her blonde hair was secured in a perfect bun, and her blue eyes radiated confidence. She raised her hand to wave to the guests, who responded with enthusiastic applause. She smiled like a star who knew victory was already written. A few moments later, Aaliyah appeared. There was no luxury in her entrance. She wore simple black cotton pants and a plain t-shirt, barefoot. Her natural curls were held back with a dark band. She didn't smile, didn't greet anyone. She walked slowly, but every step landed with weight, like a statement. Her deep brown eyes, steady and focused, carried something the audience couldn't quite explain. Dignity mixed with defiance. One of the lawyers, laughing, commented out loud, "This is going to be quick." Others agreed, amused, as if they were about to watch a play. Daniel, standing in the corner, watched silently. His heart was pounding harder by the second, but his eyes never left Aaliyah. Savannah adjusted her GE, rolled her neck, and stepped into the center of the mat. "Ready for humiliation," she taunted with a cold smile. Aaliyah took a deep breath, moved into a basic stance, and replied simply, "I didn't come here to play." The instructor overseeing the match gave the signal to begin. As soon as he did, Savannah charged with speed, taking Aaliyah down in the first move. The audience erupted in applause and laughter, convinced the result was already decided. Savannah pinned her opponent to the ground, brought her face close, and whispered, "You'll never be part of my world." But Aaliyah didn't respond. She just closed her eyes for a second and remembered the early mornings training in modest gyms. The time she held back tears in front of her daughter to appear strong. The pain life had handed her without warning. When she opened her eyes again, there was a fire burning in them. With a quick hip escape, she surprised Savannah and broke free from the dominant position. The movement was so fluid that it took the guests a moment to understand what had just happened. Before Savannah could react, Aaliyah locked in a precise armbar, forcing the heiress to scream in pain. The entire garden fell silent. In seconds, Savannah's confidence crumbled. She struggled, but her body wouldn't respond. The hold was perfect, inescapable. And then, in front of everyone, Savannah tapped the mat in surrender. An incredulous hush swept through the crowd, followed by surprised murmurs. Some lifted their phones higher, trying to capture the moment no one had expected. Others just looked at each other, unable to believe the maid had defeated the Miller family's daughter. As she was released, Savannah dropped onto the mat, her face red, not just from pain, but from humiliation. "No, this can't be happening," she gasped, her eyes welling up. The audience was stunned. Some let out nervous laughs. Others stared in disbelief, unable to hide it. Daniel, however, couldn't hold back his emotions. His eyes filled with tears, and he stepped forward, almost onto the mat. Aaliyah simply stood, breathing deeply, without celebrating, without raising her arms. Her victory wasn't against Savannah. It was against a world that had always tried to reduce her to silence. And in that moment, everyone there understood that the fight had been far bigger than a contest of skill. The garden still echoed with the shock of Savannah's defeat. Some guests whispered, trying to hide their discomfort. Others quickly checked their phones, as if searching for another topic to avoid the silence. Savannah remained on the mat, her G disheveled, her face still red with pain and disgrace. Suddenly, she stood up in a flash, ignoring the instructor's offer to help. Her blue eyes no longer glowed with confidence, but with rage. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. "She's seducing my brother. She just wants to climb in life. That's what none of you see." The crowd held its breath. Some looked at each other, shocked by the accusation. Daniel, who had been leaning against one of the garden's pillars, straightened and stepped forward, fury burning in his green eyes. "No!" he said loudly, with a firmness that echoed through the silence. "You don't understand, Savannah. She's stronger than all of us put together. The problem is, you only see the mirror, and never anyone but yourself." Savannah went pale, as if she'd been hit harder than on the mat. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her brother's public accusation was a wound that burned deeper than any defeat. Richard Miller, who had been watching from the veranda, tried to step in and take control. The tycoon was visibly uncomfortable, his face stiff with the shame of seeing his daughter lose her composure in front of their guests. "That's enough. Let's end this ridiculous scene." "This isn't a topic for a Sunday afternoon," he ordered, forcing a nervous smile for the guests. But it was too late. The tension had already spread across the garden, weaving itself between every guest, and no one could pretend anymore. Aaliyah, who had remained silent until then, lifted her chin. Her brown eyes scanned them all, one by one, and when she spoke, her voice did not waver. "Tomorrow I'm leaving." The words dropped like a stone into still water. Silence fell completely. Even the birds flying over the garden seemed to vanish. Daniel stepped forward, as if wanting to stop her, but he found no words. Savannah bit her lower lip, feeling the victory she so desperately wanted turn to ruin. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, knowing there was nothing left he could control that night. Aaliyah stepped off the mat with firm steps, crossed the veranda, and entered the mansion without looking back. The door closed slowly behind her, leaving only one certainty in the air. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next day dawned gray in Atlanta, as if the sky itself reflected the weight of what had happened at the mansion. Daniel left the wealthy Buckhead neighborhood without looking back. He drove for almost an hour until he reached the south side of the city, where the scenery changed on every corner. Simple homes, some weather-worn, children playing soccer on dirt streets, neighbors sitting in plastic chairs on their porches. The car stopped in front of a modest light wood house, surrounded by a small fence weathered by rain. In the dirt yard, a 5-year-old girl played with a rag doll. She ran barefoot, inventing stories for her fabric friend, laughing loudly without caring about the simplicity of her surroundings. Daniel stood still for a few seconds, watching a scene that felt so far from the world he'd grown up in. The front door opened and Aaliyah appeared. She wore a simple cotton dress, her hair tied back in a messy bun, and her gaze carried both exhaustion and strength. She wasn't surprised to see Daniel standing at the gate. She just took a deep breath, as if she had been expecting him. "Daniel, why are you here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. He walked through the small gate and stopped just a few steps from her. His eyes never left hers. "Because I needed to see you. I needed to understand what I've been feeling since the day I saw you in that trophy room." Aaliyah looked away for a moment, watching her daughter chase the doll around the yard. Her expression softened, but quickly returned to its usual resolve. "You don't belong here, Daniel. There's no luxury here, no masks. Only life as it really is. You won't last." He stepped closer, his voice trembling with emotion. "You were never just a maid to me, Aaliyah. You showed me what courage looks like, what dignity really is. I'm not going back to that mansion. I'm staying here. With you." Her breath caught. The walls she had worked so hard to build began to crack. "Don't say that unless it's true," she whispered. "I can't take any more promises that never come true." Daniel stepped forward again and took her hands, strong, calloused hands. "Look into my eyes. I'm here because I want to stay. I choose you. I choose the life you've built. Even with pain, even with loss. This is where I want to be." Aaliyah tried to resist, but the weight of his sincerity broke through her last defense. The tear she had held back for years finally fell, and before she could compose herself, Daniel pulled her into an embrace and kissed her. This time, there was no hesitation. She kissed him back with intensity, as if finally allowing life to give her something in return. The little girl in the yard stopped playing and watched them, not fully understanding, but with a curious smile. That simple scene carried within it the beginning of a quiet revolution. Inside the house, the old clock marked the passing time, and each second seemed to announce that Daniel's choice had no return. The following months were like a whirlwind that turned everyone's fate upside down. Daniel kept the promise he had made. He broke ties with the family business, signing off from the boards and giving up a fortune many thought was impossible to refuse. The news spread in the local papers. Tycoon's son walks away from empire to live in South Atlanta. To some, he was a fool. To others, a hero. In the heart of the outskirts, alongside Aaliyah, he launched the Root Project, a simple but vibrant space built in an old, abandoned warehouse. The floor was covered with donated mats, and the walls were painted with colorful graffiti featuring messages of resilience. Children and teens arrived shyly, some still in school uniforms, others carrying the harshness of life in their eyes. But once inside, they found something they had never felt before: a sense of belonging. On the afternoon of the opening, Aaliyah was taking care of the final details when Daniel called her over, watching the first kids line up for training. "Look, Aaliyah, this is bigger than any medal, bigger than any title." She smiled, her heart racing as she saw young ones repeating the moves that had once saved her. "It's all I ever wanted," she replied. "A place where they can find strength before life breaks them." A small girl raised her hand and asked in a timid voice, "Miss Aaliyah, can we really become champions one day?" Aaliyah crouched down to eye level and answered with sweet firmness, "You already are champions. Every step you take in here is a victory." Outside, neighbors and curious onlookers gathered to watch. Urban music played through makeshift speakers, and the sound of applause filled the air. Daniel, moved, hugged Aaliyah in front of everyone. For the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Savannah sank into a different kind of silence. After the public humiliation and the buzz from the backyard duel, her image collapsed. Social media called her arrogant. Videos of her defeat went viral in seconds, and the heiress once used to applause now felt the weight of rejection. Friends distanced themselves, invitations stopped, and she was left alone in front of the mirror she had always adored. In the spacious living room of her apartment, she tried to ignore the emptiness surrounding her, but she couldn't. It was her own mother who, during a delicate visit, said firmly, "Savannah, you need help." It's time to look inward and stop fighting ghosts. And so, reluctantly, Savannah began therapy. In her first session, she faced the couch like it was another ring. But when the therapist asked, "Who are you when you're not winning?" silence overtook her. For the first time, she had no answer, While Savannah faced her inner demons, Aaliyah and Daniel were building, step by step, something no money could buy. The Root Project grew, gaining respect, attracting volunteers, transforming young lives that had only known the hardness of the streets. Still, from afar, Savannah couldn't ignore that the strength of the woman she once tried to humiliate was now the very strength inspiring an entire community. The warehouse turned school was packed. Neighbors, teens, mothers, and fathers filled every available space, some standing, others seated in plastic chairs. Colorful balloons, donated by local shopkeepers, decorated the entrance, and the smell of homemade food wafted from makeshift tables in the side yard. In the center, the new mat gleamed under the light of simple lamps. Daniel adjusted the microphone while Aaliyah, wearing the second-hand white jiu-jitsu gi she had bought herself, took a deep breath. Beside her, her daughter clutched the edge of her mother's gi, eager to see the audience. The chatter faded as Aaliyah took 2 steps forward. Her voice rang out firm, yet filled with emotion. The hardest fight isn't on the mat. The hardest fight is against prejudice, against silence, against the lie that we don't belong. But we do belong. We always have. Her words cut through the room like silent punches. Some applauded right away, others needed a moment to let it sink in. But soon, the whole room echoed in applause. Daniel Tant moved, held her hand in front of everyone and whispered, "You changed my life. And now you're going to change theirs too." She smiled, tears quietly pooling in her eyes, and replied simply, "Not alone. Never alone again." In the back of the room, nearly hidden among the guests, Savannah watched. She looked different, her hair down, plain clothes, her face bare of heavy makeup. Her blue eyes, once filled with scorn, now reflected silence and reflection. For the first time, she didn't look like she was at war with the world, but with herself. When the applause rang out, Savannah didn't clap or turn away. She just stood there, still, allowing herself to feel. At the end, everyone was invited to see the plaque at the school's entrance. Children rushed ahead, pulling their parents by the hand, eager to see what was written. Daniel removed the cloth covering it, revealing the engraved words in wood. "Strength isn't in winning, it's in enduring." The crowd read it together, and a wave of emotion passed through them. The imaginary camera slowly pulled back, showing the children running to the mat, laughing, practicing their first jiu-jitsu moves under Aaliyah's guidance. Little barefoot feet patted the floor, clumsy arms tried to mimic positions, and laughter filled the space with life. Daniel and Aaliyah stood hand in hand, watching the scene like people watching the future unfold right in front of their eyes. And for the first time in a long time, there was peace. True strength isn't about winning. It's about never giving up on who you are. And so ends this story of pain, courage, and transformation. But now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this journey? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me how much this story moved you. If you liked it, give the video a like, share it with someone who needs to feel this too, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, don't leave just yet. I picked another powerful story for you, even more intense, and I know it's going to touch your heart.